Okay, so I have the coffee table in the back waiting. It took us a little bit longer to determine the finish, but so I'm waiting for finish to arrive. And while I'm waiting, I'm going to work on this, which is a project for myself. I want to make frames slash art installation. And I don't know how this is going to go. I honestly don't do a lot of slab work. I'm going to make 4 picture frames out of this, and the pictures are basically just going to go like this, and then I'm going to cut it into 4s and have it look like, hopefully it kind of flows. So I don't know where to even begin. So as I've already stated, I don't do a lot of slab work. It's a weird thing. I really do love slabs, and I think that they're really, really beautiful, but I just don't find that they kind of fit my personal style. Generally, I find them to be a little rustic and masculine looking for, my tastes. And so it's not my inclination to work with them at all. But I saw this picture on Pinterest, and it was an artist work. Her name is M. Kettner. And I'll be honest, I don't love her artwork. It's kind of weird and dark for my tastes, but she frames her work in just solid chunks of wood, and it's really, really beautiful. The piece that I saw was this piece of highly figured cherry, and I just thought it was so pretty. And I have these family pictures that I've been wanting to frame, and I just didn't want to put them in the typical frame with a mat kind of situation. And so I've been thinking about what I could do to make these kind of special. And when I saw that, I really wanted to do something similar. But I have 4 pictures, and so I wanted them to kind of feel cohesive. And so I was trying to think like, okay, I can do some sort of tabletop type glue up and then cut them apart. But then you might have seams that fall weird, and despite our best efforts, a tabletop type glue up never looks like one cohesive piece of wood. And then it hit me like, why don't you go get a slab and you can just cut that up into sections, because it will look like a continuous piece of wood, because it is a continuous piece of wood. And so that's what I decided to do. And the toughest part about picking out this slab is finding one that was thin enough. Like, I didn't want to take a 2 or a 3-inch slab and turn it into a whole bunch of sawdust. So this was the thinnest one I could find that was also wide enough, because I did want these to be quite substantial. My pictures are 8x8s, and I wanted the frame to at least be a 20x20. So far, all you've seen me do is make this center line that goes across the slab. And throughout the build, you're going to see me redrawing these lines over and over again. And I felt like this was important because I want everything to line up when I'm done. Even though these are going to be individual frames, I really want them to feel like one cohesive unit. So throughout this entire build, I focused on keeping these pieces all lined up where they would flow continuously from one end to the other. The other thing that I kept repeatedly marking is their order. On a project like this, it's probably true I would be able to get things back into the right order pretty easily, but I just didn't want to take any chances, because it's essential to like the design of this that this board get put back in the right order. Once I had that midline marked off, I used my framer square to draw all of my crosscut lines. I couldn't think of a safer way to cut this than some sort of a handsaw, so like a jigsaw, circular saw, track saw. But the problem being, I loaned out my track saw, so I didn't have it available. So that's why I went to my circular saw. I don't have the equipment to thickness the slab when it was one continuous piece. And so I considered building some sort of like a router sled situation, but I just didn't think it would be worth it time-wise to do that. I think I might have been wrong about that though. So the only equipment I have that's wide enough to accommodate these slabs is my drum sander. And y'all know how slow a drum sander is. I've complained about this many times now. So I just used scraps of plywood as a sled, and I shimmed and hot glued these to those sleds and ran them through my drum sander until I got them flat on one side, and then I flipped them over and did the other side. This probably took me like 4 hours. It felt like an eternity, but once they were flat, they still were really kind of chunky. They just felt like way too heavy for a picture frame. And so I decided to give up and take them over to Clyde's and let him finish thicknessing them for me. I will say, having a commercial workshop in your area really does make you a lazy woodworker. A few years ago, I would have just sat here and toughed this out and done it myself. But just for comparison, to get these slabs flattened probably took me 4 hours in my shop. But with the commercial equipment that they have, they had these things flattened and sanded in 7 minutes. Because I had these boards surfaced, there wasn't a center line on the face anymore. So I used the center lines on the sides to transfer that mark back onto the surface. Once I had that, I took it over to my table saw and cleaned up the sides and cut everything to their final width. This measurement was also going to determine their height because I wanted everything to be a square. So that meant I was going to need to cut off a little bit of that live edge on both the top and the bottom. When I was measuring for the height, I was sure to do so based around that midline so that everything stayed nice and centered and that the 4 pieces would line up. Okay, so since I don't have a straight edge on either of these things, I need some sort of like cross-cutting method to make a straight edge. And so I think I'm just going to use my sliding table since I have it to make that cut. Once I get like a straight edge on these sides, I guess I could just use I might probably do that. So I think that's probably what I'll do. Okay, so these are the pictures that I want to frame, and you can see why, right? Like, this is how I want people to remember me, not dressed like a lumberjack cutting wood all day. Yeah, so these look to actually 8 inches. So this opening in the back is what actually needs to be 8 inches, maybe a little bit over. Okay, I need to make that 16th. That's going to be 12 16ths. So that's going to be 7 and 5/16. Okay, then I need to I think I'm going to make a template for that because I need to repeat it 4 times. And I think that will just make everything easier. Okay, so I want something that's going to hold together for at least 4 times, but I don't feel like spending a ton of time on this. And I want it to be really consistent, so I don't want to use just like the double tape situation. So I think what I'm going to do is pocket holes. Okay, so I'll be real honest, I hardly ever use my pocket hole jig. I bought this, when I was a beginning woodworker, and I'm not going to trash talk it because it's a method of joinery that can give you pretty good results, and they're strong, and it's really good for people starting out. Like, it makes woodworking very accessible. But the reason I don't use this is like generally I just like to do like traditional joinery. Like, I enjoy it. And then the other thing is I found on hardwoods, I don't have much luck with pocket holes. They usually almost always crack the wood. So they work okay on plywood and some like poplar. You can kind of get away with it. But generally I prefer just doing traditional joinery. All right, there we go. And please don't be offended by me using cherry hardwood plywood for my shop jigs. I've had this stuff laying around the shop forever and haven't used it. So I'm trying to find ways of putting it to good use. Okay. Got it. So I need to mark. I hate pocket strips. Even on plywood, they shift. It drives me nuts. All right. Okay, so I marked out the center line. Well, I already had this center line. I marked out the center line on this on each piece. And then I marked the center of the square here and carried that line over onto the inside. And then theoretically, when I line up all of those lines there, then I have the square where the picture is gonna go. So I use this jig to cut the window out for the picture. And just a tip, anytime you're routing with a template, when you're raising or lowering your router bit, you want to push the router away from your template. You don't want to accidentally gouge it, because then you're going to transfer that gouge to every workpiece you use the jig on afterwards. Once I got as deep as my router would allow me to, I just removed the jig and then used the walls of the wood as the template to cut all the way through. Once I had plunged through and made the window for the picture, I used my rabbiting bit to create a groove larger than the opening in the back. This opening should be the size of whatever it is that you're wanting to frame. And at this point, I wasn't sure if I wanted to use any glass or not. I really wanted these pictures to remain matte looking, and so I didn't want any shine on it. But I went ahead and cut the groove deep enough that if I wanted to, I could include glass, the picture, and then whatever kind of backer I was going to use. I needed to square up the corners of the openings, and I thought the easiest and fastest way to do this would just be my handsaw. I just used the opening as a guide to keep my saw straight, and the corners cleaned up really quick doing this. Okay, so now I need to make some backs to go in here to like hold the picture. I'm not sure yet if I'm going to cut any plexiglass or not. I kind of think I want to leave them just the pictures exposed, because it would kind of look glossy to put the glass in there, or the plexiglass. But anyway, regardless, at the moment, what I'm focusing on are these backers. And a simple way you could do that is to buy just like a mat board and cut it to size. But I have this like leftover maple plywood from my tabletop that I will use for probably nothing else. So I thought it would be, a perfect use of this material. So I think I'm just going to cut them to size to fit in the back. And I think instead of squaring the corners with chisels, I'm going to round the corners of this, because this is just like a veneer backed MDF. So they'll be really easy to shape. So I just used my belt sander to go ahead and round up the corners. And I wasn't that precise about it because nobody's ever going to really see these. I just rounded one corner, made sure it fit, and then used that as a template to do the rest. I decided to hang these using a keyhole in the back, and I felt like my best bet was to use just one. That way I didn't have to level anything when I'm actually hanging these. It was already going to be tricky to get these exactly even, and I really didn't want to have to fuss with trying to level each individual picture as well. With that being said, that meant it was really important that I got these dead in the center so that they would hang straight, and that I got them placed at the exact same height on each picture frame. So again, the solution to this kind of a problem is a jig. And a lot of my jigs, I don't put that much thought into. I run into some problem in the shop, and then I just kind of think, okay, well, what is it that I need here? I need two guides on the side. I need a stop that will positively register with the top of each picture, and I need it to move my router about 1 inch. And so I go grab a pile of scrap wood, I grab my workpiece, and I start cutting things, and either glue and brad nail something together, use screws, or whatever it takes to just make the little jig that's going to solve my problem. This jig made it super simple to route these keyhole slots and to get them in the exact same location on every single picture frame. The hardest part about using this router bit is just remembering to turn your router off before you raise it again. There's been several times that I've forgotten to do this and I've put the hole in the wrong spot. So with a little bit of cleanup, a little bit of sanding, and a little bit of walrus oil furniture finish, these guys are ready for their pictures. Then to mount the pictures, I just use the backer board as a template to cut the corners off. And then I use this point driver. It's just a cheap one I found off of Amazon to secure the pictures in the backs into the opening. Okay, here they are. I'm so happy I finally got my family photos hung, and I really appreciate you watching. See you next time.